During a spirited debate with a guest about Donald Trump's disastrous economic agenda, two Trump-supporting Fox News hosts were visibly triggered on air and made some major mistakes as a consequence. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we've got a couple of clips to show you in this video, but first I got to set the table, and it really starts with the Wall Street Journal. So the Wall Street Journal, for those of you who don't know, is a wildly popular, historic, conservative publication. It's one of the biggest in the country, on par with the likes of the New York Times and the LA Times and the Washington Post. It's a big deal. It's also, coincidentally, owned by News Corp, which is the same conglomerate which owns Fox News. So the Wall Street Journal is a conservative sister company of the Fox Propaganda Network. That's a very crucial detail. Keep it in mind. Also important is that the Wall Street Journal published a report concluding that Donald Trump's economic agenda, if he gets a second term, based on what he said he would do, is disastrous and much more harmful and much more conservatively irresponsible than even Vice President Harris's, right? Obviously, the Wall Street Journal is not a big fan of Vice President Harris, but they recognize that her economic agenda is actually superior according to The Economist. And this is crucial to the clip I'm about to play next. Economists say inflation deficits will be higher under Trump than Harris. In a Wall Street Journal survey, economists see Donald Trump's plans as more inflationary by a larger margin than in July when President Biden was on the ticket and compared to what Vice President Harris wants to do. Okay, so with that in mind, Martha MacCallum and Katie Pavlick have a debate with Robert Wolf, who is a liberal Fox News contributor. He's a defender and a surrogate of Vice President Kamala Harris and President Biden. And it's basically a 2v1. And when Robert Wolf points this out, like, hey, the Wall Street Journal, a conservative publication, and economists all agree that Donald Trump's economic agenda would be disastrous, I want you to see how a triggered Martha MacCallum reacts.
When they both gave a plan on manufacturing, the Wall Street Journal hammered President Trump's plan, hammered it. They called it like a deer in headlights. They did, and they actually said Vice President Kamala's plan was friendlier to business.
Well, Katie,
that's your Wall Street Journal.
I'll let you respond to it. I understand that's the Wall Street Journal. I just see what regular folks seem to be thinking and feeling and saying across the country. And I'm not sure they care too much, what the Wall Street Journal's opinion is. But, we're going to see that on Election Day. Katie.
So Martha MacCallum, a Fox News host, a host of a company that is part of the same conglomerate as the conservative Wall Street Journal. These aren't rivals. They are they are colleagues, they're allies, they're peers under the same umbrella. And Martha MacCallum is so upset, visibly upset, by the disastrous report from her conservative Wall Street Journal colleagues about Trump, her preferred candidate, and his economic agenda. And she just totally throws the Wall Street Journal under the bus. I don't think the real folks give a shit about what the Wall Street Journal has to say. Now, I'm paraphrasing there, but that's effectively what she is saying. She's throwing the Wall Street Journal under the bus because she doesn't like what they have to say. And again, it would be one thing if it were MSNBC or even CNN, a competitor, a rival, somebody they see as the liberal media. But the Wall Street Journal? That's how you know this hurts, seeing Martha MacCallum just like she has to make that jab about the Wall Street Journal and then look down in frustration because she doesn't like what they're reporting, because they can't handle facts, because the facts are so often opposed to Donald Trump's agenda and to Donald Trump himself, quite frankly. On that subject, before I play you the next clip in which Katie Pavlick, the other pro-Trump Fox News host in that exchange, she makes a major mistake as well. But before I do, just on this, through line about how disastrous Trump's economic agenda is, I want you to hear a segment from the Squawk Box on CNBC, hosted in part by MAGA lunatic Joe Kernan, right? Somebody we've talked about in previous videos. He also had to confront a disastrous conservative report about Trump's economic agenda.
New estimates of the revenue raised from former President Trump's proposed tariffs would make it potentially one of the biggest tax hikes in decades. And senior economics reporter Steve Leisman joins us with the details. Hey, Steve.
Morning, Joe. Yeah, the Conservative American Enterprise Institute says the tariffs proposed by former President Trump, 20% on all imports to the U.S. across the board, would cost Americans as much as $3.9 trillion. Kyle Parmalu, senior fellow at AEI, says that would amount to one of the biggest tax hikes since at least the 1980s. He says it would be like any other tax increase. It will have a negative impact on growth and employment and also hurt U.S. exporters. Now, President Trump has said that the tariffs are paid by foreign companies and would boost U.S. growth by bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. Most economists from the right and the left disagree. In fact, conservative economists who find other parts of the Trump agenda, like tax cuts, will boost growth, say the tariffs could nearly offset all those pro-growth policies and their benefits. A paper by the conservative Cato Institute says, quote, such aggressive protectionism would be extremely damaging to the economy and broader foreign policy goals.
And it goes on like this. The bottom line is that even conservative economic experts who are politically and ideologically predisposed to grade Trump on a curve to back him in the election, they're forced to come out and say these ideas are so stupid and disastrous and fiscally irresponsible, not fiscally conservative. Of course, Donald Trump was never particularly fiscally conservative. He contributed twice as much to the national debt as President Biden, even if you control for COVID. And Trump was the one who vowed not only to not add to the debt, he said that he would wipe out all the debt he'd inherited from his predecessors. So, and he also deficit spent. Even though the economy was firing on all cylinders, there was no real need to do so. So by standards of fiscal conservatism, Donald Trump has only ever been an abject disaster. And it's hilarious watching so many Republicans, confront the fact that Donald Trump is not an economic genius, that the Democrats are vastly objectively superior when it comes to economic management. Now, the perception still favors Trump on this. And let's be clear, perception ultimately matters more than the facts. Facts don't speak for themselves. And unless you're able to parlay them into a persuasive narrative, Trump enjoys a polling advantage on the economy. Though I should also say that Vice President Harris has been cutting into that advantage, shrinking that advantage of Trump, reducing that deficit for her. So she's gaining ground on him. And I think things like these reports, higher prices, larger deficits, 23 Nobel Prize winning economists slam Trump's agenda and endorse Harris. That doesn't help Trump's case. And that's why these Fox News hosts are so upset. Now, I said we could return to Katie Pavlick here. So she's, again, the other Fox News host in question who's supporting Trump. She makes a mistake in her zealous need to defend Trump here. Let's see if you catch it.
That we can speak to when it comes to this race.
That's just not accurate. We've had a factory boom. We have, the Foxconn plant that everyone talked about in Wisconsin.
Why is it that Kamala Harris didn't get the UAW endorsement, Robert? Well, what about the union endorsement that didn't come through for Kamala Harris?
Listen,
why isn't she getting that endorsement?
So her argument is, if the Democrats have been so good for manufacturing, why hasn't the UAW endorsed her? We'll come back to that in a second. But by that logic, given that unions are much more inclined even now to endorse Democrats over Trump and Republicans, by your own logic, that means Democrats are always better on manufacturing than Republicans. If the metric is endorsements, let's be clear, endorsements matter. Endorsements matter a lot. But that's her chosen metric. By that logic, Democrats are, even now, and have always been better for manufacturing and for actual job creation than Republicans. Is Katie Pavlick intending to concede that? No, what she's hoping is to hit, Robert Wolf where it hurts by saying she's moving the goalposts. Okay, well, endorsements are what matter for the sake of this conversation. And how come, if Kamala Harris is so damn good for the economy, for manufacturing, why doesn't she have the endorsement of the UAW? She does have the endorsement of the UAW, United Auto Workers. They endorsed her back in July 31st, Wednesday, July 31st. The UAW International Executive Board voted to endorse Kamala Harris for president of the United States. She does have the UAW endorsement. So not sure what Katie Pavlick is talking about. Maybe she meant the Teamsters endorsement, but Teamster chapters across the country flocked to endorse Vice President Harris when the national team declined to do so. So even then, Harris has a colossal advantage over Trump with respect to union endorsement. So I'm not entirely sure that that's the metric by which you want to evaluate the candidates. Otherwise, you'd be forced to admit, if you were honest, that your candidate is inferior to the Democratic candidate, which, of course, Katie Pavlick and Martha McCallum will never do. So it's so funny to see them get so triggered by the facts that they make these obvious mistakes, throwing the Wall Street Journal under the bus, because they don't like what the Wall Street Journal has to say, and then making this comical mistake about the UAW when the UAW did, in fact, endorse Vice President Harris. You love to see Fox News hosts triggered. Hopefully we'll see more of it. And in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.